Welcome, fellow brave believers. This is Kingdom Cast. I'm your host, Sean. Thank you for joining me. And this is the podcast where we search for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of the Creator's Word and of this world, so we may better understand and relate His Word to this world. So that's our passion. That's our prayer for this podcast. And we are going to be picking up part 16 of Investigating Babylon. This is the series that we've been doing for about a year now. Actually, we've been going through it, and it is an extensive series looking at the bad guys and their forms of deception and their forms of government and oppression that's been implemented and tricking people throughout the world over time to get them away from covenant behavior, to get them away from understanding who the Creator is and how to walk in love with Him and how to walk in love with your fellow man. So we're looking at Babylon, and we're investigating all the different facets of Babylon. Part 16, we're going to be looking at the second beast and the mark of the beast as detailed in Revelation 13. So I'm excited for everyone to be here. Just want to say hello to a few people that's in the chat. Welcome Anita Vega, Carrie M, GR Cleve, Jubian Kenobi, Damian Williams, Jason Kenny, Michelle M. Welcome everyone. Wind Feathers back. Doug Abracto. I hope I said that right. Ruach Netzarim, James Sims, Pepper Moon. Welcome everyone. Christopher Gomez, Eric Rice. Welcome. Wendy Moore, cover to cover with Jeremy Piers. Welcome. Pepper Moon. Pepper got 2 shout-outs. Elias Stewart is back. Robert Daniels. Appreciate all you guys in here. There's so many more, and can't get to all of them. But guys, I hope to encourage you with what we're going to talk tonight, even though some of it may seem, it may seem not fun, because we're talking about some things nobody really wants to talk about. But I just want to encourage you that the Father's got a plan. And that's why he tells you even some of the bad stuff that may be coming, so that you can understand that he's got a plan. He knows that's coming, and he's got a plan. That's why he gives us all this wonderful information through prophets that we refer to as prophecy. So be encouraged no matter what you hear. It doesn't mean that you won't have the resurrection as a hope, or it doesn't mean that that you won't it won't affect you. That's the crazy part, guys, that we've done different shows in the past. I have another show on my main channel, Kingdom in Context, that I do with my brother Ken Heidelbrecht from Hanging on His Words, and that's a show we do together called Honor of Kings. And so if you haven't already subscribed to Ken Heidelbrecht's channel, Hanging on His Words, go do that, because we're doing another episode on Sunday of Honor of Kings. And in that show, we look at some of these books that were either taken out of Bibles throughout the years, or used to be in the American canon but was taken out, but they're still in other canons around the world. And one of those books is that mentions, it's the book of Second Ezra. We reviewed in the earlier part of season 3, and we reviewed I think chapter 27, where it goes through all these different plagues and different things that are happening before the return of the Messiah. And one of those things is that there will be a mixture of all types of different bad things happening. That's going to be happening, like, the way it's worded is kind of weird. It says that, they will lend one to another as they're kind of mixed together and happening all over the place, all over the world. But it also says there's some people that won't even realize exactly what's happening. And I'm not sure if that's in a first world nation or not, but at the same time, our hope is in the resurrection, guys. It's appointed all of men to die once and then judgment. No one's getting out of here alive, so to speak, if I could put it like that. But knowing that, hopefully we can have a mature response about it, right? Not to be in fear, but to know what the Father promises us if we walk with Him in His covenant behavior, keeping His commandments like His Son exemplified for us. We put our faith in His Son, that He will raise us from the dead, that He will grant us the eternal life if we trust in them and practice their behavior. And that is the wonderful promise that we have. So with that said, I just want to kind of preface tonight, because we will be talking about some adult things. We'll be talking about some history, some archaeology. We'll be talking about the future prophecies. And I just want to encourage you that the bad guys aren't as bad as they like to portray themselves. They're not as strong as they like to portray themselves. And so the Father's stronger. He's got a plan. And I want you guys to trust in that. All right. So let's jump right into it. This is part 16 of our Investigating Babylon series, and we're going to be looking at the mark of the beast, guys. Now, if you're new to this channel and this series, just as a quick reminder, we did the first 7 parts pertaining to the past, All right, the origination of the Tower of Babel and the city, as well as how it came together, what was going through the minds of the people when that happened, who were the names and characters that people mentioned back then that is relevant to us today. So, in fact, as we identify the second beast in this episode, we're actually going to be going back into the past a little bit and showing you in the Old Testament who that is. Then we did 7 parts on the present, and that is where we're looking at modern machinations of deception and different ways that their practices from thousands of years earlier have been carried on and are still being carried on today. And then now we're currently in part 16, which is 2 steps into our 7 parts of the future prophecies of Babylon and what might befall us in our lifetime or possibly our children. Who knows? Or maybe further. People ask me all the time, Sean, how long do you think? Because if I do a show like this, I talk about prophecy. So naturally, this question comes up from people. They'll ask you, how long do you think until Jesus returns? And I always say, guys, if you take all my research seriously in this study, guys, in this Investigating Babylon series, then from all that research, this is my conclusion that I give us at minimum another 50 to 70 years, and at most another 100 to 200 years. Because the things that need to be in place and the certain concepts, I know a lot of people disagree with this opinion, but this is just my opinion. I don't think that the enemy's ready to perpetrate the types of things that we've been reviewing in this series as far as future prophecy, and I'm going to go into that in greater detail in a little bit of this series, this part here, in part 16, as well as the last 5 parts. All right, part 17 through 21. So I just want to, and just let you know, I'm not the kind of dude that's out there trying to set a date for the return of Yeshua anyway. But if I had to give like a general time frame, people will say, is it going to happen in 10 years? Is it going to happen in our lifetime, my children's lifetime? My best guess would be it's going to happen in our children's lifetime. But it still may not be. It depends on actually, maybe how things go in the next 5 to 10 years with people resisting the current deception being pushed upon the world. And that might cause the enemy to realize that it's just not ready. They're just not in the place of control that they want to be. So therefore, they need to wait another 100 or 200 years. Because guys, like I've actually met people, not intentionally, but by accident. I've met people that are part of an international group that they do is they work for, they're a special company that works for cities across the world, and they're developing carless cities for the future. All right, so I'll go ahead and put this back on me for a minute, but they're developing like what they're calling pedestrian friendly, motorless or vehicleless cities in the future. Now they did talk about they'll probably, at least the person I was talking to that was kind of sharing with me some of the things they're working on for the future, for 50 to 100 years from now, is that to build these cities where you can't even drive a car into it unless it's like a taxi or like an Uber or like the automated Ubers that they're trying to push on the populace, self-driving cars. So that's what they're planning. Like, and they're being employed by all like these big people, the world governments and cities of major cities to restructure cities so that, and that's a plan for 100, 200 years down the road to be fully implemented where people, would not have the freedom to leave the city basically because they don't have their own car. Right now, the whole world has the ability to move about with vehicles, and that poses a huge logistical problem for trying to create little prison cities by authoritarian. There's only so many grunts that can sell out their countrymen and enforce totalitarian authoritarianism. There's only so many of them, guys. The populace is way greater. So there's some logistical things that goes into me making this guess when people ask me, and I guess 50 to 70 minimum, 100 to 200 at most. And it's because I don't think the enemy's ready yet to do the things that we're going to talk about tonight. So let's get right into it, guys. This is our Investigating Babylon series. Who is this guy? Who is this second beast that's mentioned in Revelation 13? Because I'm going to, as go through this, he's the one that implements the mark, not the first beast. Who is this second beast? He's like the second in command to the beast. He's like the lackey, the helper, the assistant, whatever you want to call him. He's the cheerleader for the first beast. He's the one that implements the mark. He's the one that creates the image of the beast that's given the breath of life, and it causes people to worship the first beast. So everything that this guy does is to point back to the authority of the first beast and get people to worship the first beast. So who's this second guy? And does the scripture tell us who it is? And I'm going to say yes, it does. We'll go through it. Let's read real quick about what it describes about the second beast so that we can get some foundational descriptions as we go forward. Revelation 13:11-15 says, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. This beast had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. And the beast exercised all the authority of the first beast and caused the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. And the second beast performed great signs to cause even fire from heaven to come down to earth in the presence of the people. Because of the signs it was given to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image to the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was permitted to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship it to be killed." It goes on to say in Revelation 13:16-18, "The second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, the name of the beast or the name of the beast or the number of its name. Here is a call for wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and that number is 666. It's actually 666. A lot of translations will just put in the digits, but it's actually 660 and 6. It's not 3 6s. It's 660 and 6. Revelation 14:9-10 goes on to explain that a third angel followed them, calling out in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on its head, on its forehead, or on its hand, he too will drink the wine of God's anger, poured undiluted into the cup of his wrath, and he will be tormented in fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb." We're going to go over this verse as we break down the mark and the ideas of it. But what we just read, I just want to ask everyone, who enforces the mark? Which beast? It is that second beast. So let's look, guys, about Nergal. It's a weird name, right? It's an ancient Mesopotamian god. Who is Nergal? Let's look. Let's find out here real quick. So Nergal, spelled various ways and being spoken slightly different languages. There's actually the ancient Sumerian script on there, which I thought was fascinating that my computer allowed me to put it on there. But he was a deity who was worshipped throughout ancient Mesopotamia. That's also Acadia, Assyria, and Babylonia, with the main seat of his worship at Kuta, represented by the mound of Tel Ibrahim. He was also known as Maslamtia, Era, or Era. And we're going to actually look at some of those other names as well and how they were described amongst those regions and cultures. Nergal had a multitude of functions in the religion of ancient Mesopotamia and its neighbors. God lists attest that, okay, so I just want to explain the wording here. God, when they say the word God, it's just capitalized because it's the beginning of a sentence. But when they say the word God lists, these are ancient lists from ancient Samaria, Mesopotamia, and Babylon that lists out a bunch of kings as well as all the gods that they worshipped, or at least a good portion of them. So when we get to this place of Nergal and it's trying to talk about the Sumerian Mesopotamian gods, that's what it's referring to, those lists that archaeologists have found that detail these names. So God lists attest that he had one of the highest numbers of epithets of all the documented deities, with the An-Anum list alone providing around 100. He was especially closely related to war, disease, and the underworld, and according to the Franz Wigerman, can be understood as god of inflicted death. However, Nergal's warlike nature also made him a god defending the realm, whose presence was regarded as necessary for peace. In this role, he was known under the title Lugal Selima, the Lord of Peace. He was invoked in apotropaic rituals as well, as his fearsome reputation was believed to keep houses safe from evil, quote unquote. We're going to keep going, guys, and break down these terms. And so as you can see here, I've got highlighted here that this particular guy, Nergal, or Nergal, however you want to say his name, He was especially closely related to war, disease, and the underworld. And he was considered the god of inflicted death. And we're going to break down this word apotropaic and here in a little bit and what that is and what that kind of ritual is. The symbols most commonly associated with Nergal includes a bulls, wild oxen, lions, lion-headed maces, and scimitars. Some depictions on cylinder seals depict him in a flat cap associated with underworld deities. War standards, that's the flags they would carry in the war to show what God was with them in that war. War standards would serve as a symbolic depiction of Nergal too, and the Assyrians often carries such objects representing Nergal as well as Adad, because they're the same, into battle. Okay. Well, let me put it like this. It's debated among scholars if Adad is also another representation of Nergal, but to me, it seems to be appropriate, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. Apotropaic magic, comes from the Greek word to ward off or to shoo away, to turn away, is a type of magic intended to turn away harm or evil influences, as in deflecting misfortune or averting the evil eye. Okay. Apotropaic observances may also be practiced out of a vague superstition or out of tradition, as in good luck charms, like a token, charm, or a bracelet, amulets, or gestures such as crossing your fingers and knocking on wood. The Greeks made offerings to the averting gods, who are considered chthonic deities. And by the way, I know these are kind of like silly seminary-style words. These are, your highbrow fancy words, right? But ultimately, God, that word, guys, the word chthonic just means an underworld deity, okay? Which is exactly what it talked about, Nergal being a god of war, disease, and the underworld. And it says, and heroes to who grant safety and deflect evil. So I would just want to focus on, there was a variety of ways that apotropaic magic was used. This was strongly associated with Nergal, and there specifically one of the ways that it's done with magic rituals was through the incantation to charge up an amulet, if you will. And this amulet was supposed to be a good luck charm, but more than just like a generic rabbit's foot or something that people would put any kind of legend into. But this was supposed to be an actual magical amulet that had been spoken and written magic spells on. Because remember, guys, Babylon is full of magic. They are the originators of magic at post-flood, I should say. In 2 Kings 17, 27 through 31, because we're going to go to the scriptures, guys. I know we've been talking about what the world has uncovered, deciphered, and tried to report through archaeological, anthropological sources. But let's go to the scriptures as well. Is Nergal in the scriptures? The king of Assyria commanded, send back one of the priests you carried off from Samaria and have him go back to live there and teach the requirements of God of the land. Thus, one of the priests they had carried away came and lived in Bethel, and he began to teach them how they should worship the Lord. Now, nevertheless, the people of each nation continued to make their own gods in the cities where they had settled, and they set them up in the shrines that the people of Samaria had made on the high places. The men of Babylon made Sukkot-Benoth, the men of Cuth made Nergal. The men of Hamath made Ashima, the Avites made Nibaz and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to Adremelech and Enemelech, the gods of the Sepharvim. That's like a different way of saying Molech. But guys, Nergal is the same thing that we read earlier about the center of his worship was at a place, Kuto. I'll go back to it real quick. And it's up here at the top here. With the main seat of his worship at Kuta. I think I'm saying this right. But that's in the Hebrew, it's just Cuth, which is what we see described in 2 Kings. Okay, 2 Kings 17, this is where they worship. This is after the northern house of Israel had been invaded by Assyria and scattered over time. And then there were remnants that were from a variety of different nations within the Assyrian and Babylonian Empire that were now living in the land of the northern house, which was being called Samaria at the time. And they were being affected by wild animals, and they were having troubles in the land. And so that one of the Levite priests was like, well, that's because you're in the land of Yahweh and you're not doing the covenant of Yahweh. So therefore you're getting the backlash of the covenant, which is expressed in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. So you need to teach them how to serve the Lord. So then the Assyrian king was like, okay, well, you go and you teach them how to serve the Lord. So then he sent a single priest back to the land of Assyria, or the land of Samaria, northern house of Israel area, and to teach these foreigners that were hanging out in the land, hey, this is how you worship God. But they didn't actually solely worship God. They set up all these other shrines to other idols as well. So if we go to 2 Kings 17, 27 through 31, this was the guy in Nergal of Kuth that they were actually worshiping. Okay. This is the one of the hieroglyphs from ancient Assyria, ancient Babylonia of Nergal. Okay, so as you can see here, he's depicted. He doesn't seem to have he's got these weird pants on, and he's definitely a warrior. He's got the sword in hand. He's got the scimitar mace. It's funny that the mace is actually this is what he was talking about. The mace that actually has the lion head, but it has a scorpion tail, which I think is interesting. You've got scorpions behind him on the hieroglyph, and you've got the serpents there, of course, because they obviously worship the dragon. They worship the serpent as well as a patron god. Ishtar's on the left-hand side, or on his left, but on his right, you've got the Vajra as well as a Caduceus, and then he's got the Cerberus, these three-headed dog on the left of him that he's got seemed to have like on a leash of some sort. All right, now you look at his head. If you look at his head, he's got horns above his forehead. Okay, he's got this wild hair, and so he was considered a two-horned guy. He had two horns all the time. That was his common representation of who this guy was. Jeremiah 39, 1 through 3. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his entire army and laid siege to the city. And on the 9th day of the 4th month of Zedekiah's 11th year, the city was breached. Then all the officials of the king of Babylon entered and sat in the middle gates. Nergal-Sharezer of Samgar, Nebo Sarsakim of the Rabsaris, and Nergal-Sharezer of the Rabmag, and all the rest of the officials of the king of Babylon. So the reason why I'm showing you this, guy, is just to show you that many of the people in Babylon would name themselves after one of their gods in order to show how loyal they were to them and how they were to honor them. So they would name themselves after one of their gods. Okay. So this is what we're seeing in Babylon from the king. So earlier we're looking at Assyria. So a lot of people who might actually know biblical history pretty good or pretty well, they'll actually say to themselves, all right, well, the Assyrians weren't the Babylonians, but at this point they were. In the days of Jeremiah, they'd already been invaded. Back when we read from 2 Kings 17, they weren't. The Assyrians were still independent. They weren't completely overtaken by the Babylonians just yet, but they still all worship the same gods. Here we see Nergal as one of the men taking on that moniker of that god on himself as one of the officials of the king, because they were giving allegiance. This was a common practice. They would give allegiance to that god. So this is why even the Babylonians worship Nergal as well. And here's an actual interesting, this is Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, holding or grabbing at the fire of a sacrifice. That's how the hieroglyph is described. And then Nergal is the horned figure behind him that is pulling down the tree and covering someone with the tree, as well as just participating in whatever's going on. I don't profess to know everything that's going on here. And the priest that's standing in front of the king of Shalmaneser III, he's cut all his hair off. This was common for Baal worshippers. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this little hieroglyph. But this is the region they were in. This is the common gods they all worshipped, and this is the false idols. So if we look in 2 Samuel 23:20, we have this interesting little passage about one of David's bodyguards and how he was such an amazing warrior. It says in 2 Samuel 23:20, and Benai, however you want to say his name, is the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Casbiel, who had done many acts. He slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in time of snow. Now, I think it's fascinating because if you look at the Septuagint, it says that Benai, the son of Jehoiada, he was abundant in mighty deeds from Casbiel. He smote 2 sons of Ariel of Moab. Well, this word Ariel is a term for a lion, or a lion-like man. And he went down and smote a lion also in the pit on a snowy day. So this is a lot of people. There's been a lot of speculation and theory about what's going on with this lion-like men of Moab. It's very interesting, right? What do we read about Nergal? That he was considered, what was representative of him was a lion or a lion-like figures, or the bull, or a wild oxen. And even in the hieroglyph, we see he's got this bushy hair, like he looks like a beast, like a lion with these two horns coming out of his head. So let's look at who did the Moabites actually worship. Is it truly telling us that Benaiah of Israel fought these two lion-like men of Moab and defeated them? Are we to believe that they look like this picture here? Is it just a description of how amazing they were? It's interesting because nobody else in the scriptures is described, and no other foreign army of Israel is described as having lion-like men. It's only in this passage. And Moab also worship the same gods of Assyria and Babylon. So this is lion-like men. This is actually the winged bull of some of the famous statues of Assyria. This is actually in Nineveh. They're pretty famous. The winged bull statues is classic hieroglyph and sculpture of ancient Assyria. Remember, what was Nergal described as? He was the wild bull, a wild oxen, lion-like, or a lion. So a lot of people saying, "Well, Sean, these are bulls with wings." Okay, I see. This is the winged bull, but this isn't a lion. Look at that. It's just for scale, right? I wonder who that guy in the back is. But these are the two horns that would come out of Nergal's head, consistent with all the depictions of Nergal. Oh, here's a famous lion-like hybrid with a man. Very famous one. In Egypt. It's called the Sphinx. Here is in actual Assyria, a lion. This is not a bull body. This is a lion body with the face of a man and the horns of Nergal. It's a winged lion. Here's at the entrance of the Babylonian gates. So this is not in Assyria, but this was down in Babylon, about 300 miles or 200 miles to the southeast. This is a winged lion with horns, two horns coming out the top. This was also a representation of Nergal, the god that they worshipped. Here's another sketch that people had done from an actual hieroglyph, but it's actually Nergal with a lion body. Okay. Here is Nergal, a hieroglyph of Nergal with what looks to be some sort of suit with feathers on. And if it's not, I don't think he had his own feathers, but I mean, I don't know if that was just part of his battle gear. But he's got two vajras in his hand. So guys, you guys go back to part 2, we discussed the most powerful weapon in Babylon was the vajra, and it was associated with all the main gods. It could control the weather, could control autonomous flying machines, it could control lightning. The vajra is a big deal. It's talked about in ancient India as well from Lord Indra. So here we have Nergal with two vajras looking like he's going into battle. Why? What did we read about Nergal in the beginning? That he was a god of war and disease and the underworld. Revelation 13, 11 through 15. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. This beast had two horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. And this beast exercised all the authority of the first beast, and caused the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. And the second beast performed great signs to cause even fire from heaven to come down to the earth in the presence of the people. Because of the signs it was given to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image to the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was permitted to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship it to be killed. So if you guys go back to part 2, this is why I've had to systematically go through certain topics from the previous 15 parts, so that when we get to this guy, hopefully it's all starting to just cascade like a snowball of realization of all these things are working together as descriptors and qualifiers for who we're looking at in Revelation. Here we have Nergal, two-horned god of war with the Vajra having power over thunder and lightning, creating storms. Is that the fire that's being called down in this particular instance? It's possible, but we're going to talk about another, the other idea of him fooling people with a religious practice as well. As I've mentioned before, I actually believe they're going to reinstate old school Babylonian false idol worship, which is why we already read the passage that they he gets well, it says it right here in this passage, right? Telling them to make an image to the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. Like, that's old school idolatry, guys. He's just literally telling people around the world, make an idol to this beast and worship it. And then there's ways he enforces it, but there's the way to trick them with the lying sign and wonder is going to be one of them is going to be able to call fire down from heaven. So this guy has all the right descriptors. Here's another unique image here of the winged bull with the man face, the two horns in the top, and then another guy that's normal, but he's also got the two horns on his top as well, and he's got the bag in his hand with the little pine cone that is in that famous position of bag in hand, pine cone. What's going on? What's this little purse this guy's carrying? We're not going to I'm just teasing this for a future episode. We're going to talk about this more in our Mother Babylon episode in part 20. But yeah, just know that this guy was he was carrying the purse too. Just remember that for the future. Who's this Nergal guy? We got the scorpions. What did we talk about in part 6 of this series? We talked about the scorpion soldiers of ancient Assyria and Babylon and all their hieroglyphs. Here's one on the right. Here's another group of scorpion-like soldiers with bodies of chickens, feathered little arms of chickens almost. By the way, in Hebrew, Nergal was considered translated as the dunghill rooster. And so it's fascinating, right? Because here we have what looks like a hybrid chicken with a man with the tail of a scorpion, a stinger type tail, looks almost like a wasp tail, with the face of a man. Strange looking hybrids that this normal looking man depicted looks like he's evaluating or assessing or talking to them. This is from ancient Assyria, guys. So if you're late to this series, please go back and check out part 6. The entire thing is about chimera scorpions in ancient Babylon. Here's more depictions. We got the flying machine depicted at the top. You've got this unique thing in the center, which I don't quite know as I have a guess, but I don't quite know exactly what it is. And then you've got these other little chicken hybrid, scorpion-tailed hybrid chimeras. Guys, how interesting is it that all these descriptions that I've just been giving you about Nergal, here, I want to do some real quick. This picture you're looking at is a modern day depiction from like a random artist who is fascinated with ancient gods. He was able to go and just find all the descriptions about Nergal and then make this modern day painting of Nergal. And this is what he comes out with. A lion-headed man with wings. He's got little chains wrapped around him, and he's got the skulls. Looks like the skulls of men because this guy was considered a giant. So he's got some tiny skulls. And then he's got this stinger tail. How interesting. This isn't a Bible scholar who painted this photo that you're looking at. This is just a secular dude that took the descriptions that are out there that anyone can resource, that anyone can look up. They're like, oh, who's this Nergal guy? Revelation 9, 1-6. Then the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth. It was given the key to the pit of the abyss. The star opened the pit of the abyss, and smoke rose out of it like the smoke of a great furnace. The sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the pit, and out of the smoke, locusts descended on the earth, and they were given power like that of the scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. The locusts were not given power to kill them, but only to torment them for 5 months, and their torment was like the stinging of a scorpion. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will escape them. 7-12 says, and the locusts looked like horses prepared for battle, with something like crowns of gold on their heads and faces like the faces of men. They had hair like that of women and teeth like those of lions. They also had thoraxes, that's their chest area, like their sternum area, like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the roar of many horses and the chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, which had power to injure people for 5 months. They were ruled by a king, the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek it is Apollyon. The first woe is past. Behold, 2 woes are still to follow. So what have we been describing about Nergal? Lion-like face of a man, or the opposite hybrid, right? Actual lion-like. But these descriptions here, these people have the face of a man, the teeth of lions, hair like women. So that seems like a big lion man to me, but it's being described hair like women. I'll give it that. But then also they've got these stinger tails, and they're dressed for battle with these breastplates. And what it says, their thorax is like breastplates of iron. Now I don't know if this means they literally are iron, like this is some kind of hybrid creature that actually is, like bionic, where it's part flesh of some sort and part iron. I could definitely see that. We're actually going to be talking about that a little later in the broadcast, so stick with us. But this is a very unique description of these things coming out of this pit. Nowhere in Revelation, and I just want to kind of stress this for a minute, guys, because a lot of people read this and they immediately don't want to believe it because they don't know history. They've never researched ancient Babylon's history or Assyria or any of that stuff, or ancient Egypt or Greece. They don't know that this is it's describing things that the people in the 1st century AD would have known abundantly, like, oh yeah, well, interesting. Okay, that sounds... we've seen those things, or we've heard about those things. That's our immediate history that we've been taught, is that there are chimeras running around. So therefore, when they get to this passage with the modern mindset, they think, oh, this must mean something else. This must be representative of something. Revelation does not define what these are. Nowhere in Scripture does it define what these are. No other books of prophecy anywhere. Nowhere says, oh, the vision that John saw, it's going to be these things, or even describing the same things that John saw and giving you an explanation of what they are, saying that these descriptions represent something else. Revelation does define itself for you. If you read the entirety of the book, when you get to places and it says, what is this? The angel says, I'll show you the meaning of this vision. This is what this means. This is what that means. We get like an example of that in Revelation 17. So this is a descriptor of these things that come out of the pit, who have a king over them. We've already dissected and identified who Apollyon was, a character of the ancient past, this Nimrod character, this Baal, that we see the other clan, the Canaanites, would call him Baal, right? We've identified that guy. He's Apollo to the Greeks. He was Osiris to the Egyptians. And he seems to have I want to say army. They're dressed for battle. It's a description of an army to me. They seem to have fearsome features, and they seem to be able to overpower men, to sting them. So it seems weird, right? Because why wouldn't it just kill the men instead of stinging them? And we're going to get into that. So what's fascinating, though, is that it's giving you a description, and it's telling you for the Greek readers of this day, it's telling you, you guys would know this guy's Apollyon. But it describes all these things in it doesn't seem normal to us, but it would be normal to the Greek mindset of the 1st century AD. They knew what chimeras were. They knew the stories of their gods. And they didn't believe it was myth or legend or mythos. They thought it was true history. In fact, I think it's Rob Skiba that had spoken with an actual modern day Greek historian. So in the 21st century, a Greek historian in the modern times, I'm pretty sure it was Rob Skiba that he was doing this video about, that this Greek historian told Rob that, like, their history of the Greek gods, they don't think it's myth or tales of fancy fairy tales. Like, they think it's true history. They've been told throughout thousands of years that this happened in some regard. Now, they acknowledge that there's descriptors that seem like they're embellished, but the core people that the stories are about, and their interactions and the hierarchy and the pantheon of family of the different levels of God, they believe that was a legit concept. That was a legit history. It wasn't fairy tale made up. So it's interesting, an interesting perspective that's carried on even into modern day Greece. But first century Greek peoples all throughout the Mediterranean that John's letter would be going to, and also the people of Anatolia, which would be also the what we call modern day Turkey. It was called Asia Minor back then. Um, they also knew all the Greek mythos, all the Greek stories of their gods. And here's some of those Greek gods being mentioned in that direct moment as it describes these chimeras, which are full throughout all the descriptors of the gods of Greece, Acadia, Samaria, Babylon, Egypt, all of that stuff. So this is not abnormal descriptions. So with that said, there's also from a critique standpoint, a hermeneutic standpoint, there is no other place in Revelation that interprets these things that come out of the pit as something else. It just tells you that they come out of the pit and describes them and then just moves on. You're going to have to believe it or not. And I would put forward that if we knew our history, or if we knew the history of these ancient nations, this is not an obscure passage. This is like the lion-like men of Moab. This is not obscure, guys. So we'll go to King Mesha. So this is the Moabite stone. Okay, this is something that's called a stele. It's just basically a stone that they had, a story carved onto. But it is from the king of Moab and and Omei, and it speaks of one of the northern kings of Israel. But this is also the same king of Moab that's mentioned in reference from 2 Kings 3, verse 4. So this is a famous concept that's archaeologists have found and talk about. So it's called the Moabite stone. It's the Mesha stele popularized in the 19th century as the Moabite stone. It's a black basalt stone bearing an inscription by the 9th century BC Moabite king Mesha, discovered in 1868. So 9th century BC, guys, we're talking like, around 800 BC, like what we would consider 800 BC. Okay, so this is like 100 years after Solomon. The inscription is 34 lines, most extensive inscription ever recovered from ancient Palestine. It was written in Hebrew Phoenician characters, and it was set up by Mesha about 850 BC as a record and memorial of his victories in his revolt against Israel, which he undertook after the death of his overlord Ahab. And this is verified in 2 Kings chapter 3, 1 through 4. The stone was discovered at the ancient Dibon, now Dibon, in Jordan. The stele can be seen today in the Louvre in the museum in France. So, guys, if you want a piece of apologetics for your history as far as the authenticity of the scriptural stories and claims, 2 Kings chapter 3 is validated by modern archaeology, both of the king's list of northern Israel as well as the Moabite king. And the story is the same, on both sides of the tale, from the Israelites to the Moabites. They had the same story. And it's literally written in stone. So, Judges chapter 11, 23 to 25. Now, since the Lord, the God of Israel, has driven out the Amorites from before his people Israel, should you now possess it? Do you not possess whatever your God Shamash grants you? So also, we possess whatever the Lord our God has granted us. Are you now so much better than Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab? Did he ever contend with Israel or fight against it? So this is in the days of Judges, and this is a unique moment here where there's a conversation happening, and I'm just showing you that here is Shamash, the god of the Moabites, is being mentioned in the Moabite stone, but it's also validated in Judges chapter 11 that the Moabites of that day worship Shamash. Okay? So in that region, and Shamash is mentioned 12 times on the Moabite stone. So we're getting historical validation of their worshiping the same gods in this region. Numbers 21, 29. Woe to you, Moab! You are undone, O people of Shamash. He has given his sons that escaped and his daughters into captivity to Sihon, king of the Amorites. This is in Numbers 21. So this is, I think this is actually, no, I think that's Numbers 22. But this is just basically more validation, explain to you that Moab worshipped Shamash. They were considered children of Shamash, people of Shamash, because that's who they worshipped. Okay, validating the Moabite stone, validating the time period, validating the regional gods that were worshipped outside of Israel by the Moabites, also shared by the Assyrians, Babylonians, and other peoples. They just had different names for them, guys. This is what we've talked about so often in the Investigating Babylon series, that we're looking at all the descriptors and connectors to show that these gods had the same function, had the same description, and were worshipped in the same ways, but they had different names because different cultures spoke different languages. Names do translate to other languages. So this is how all these different names for the same gods came up. 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 7. Then Solomon built a high place for Shamash, the abomination of Moab, and in the hills that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. Now, the Septuagint, it's interesting, it kind of words it very differently. It says, Solomon built a high place to Shamash, the idol of Moab, and to their king, the idol of the children of Ammon. So some people, because of that, some people will think that Molech and Shamash are actually the same god. And because the Moabites and the Ammonites were cousin tribes, descendants of long-held descendants of Lot. And after they abandoned covenant with Yahweh, they went on to worship Molech, Shamash, Baal, all these gods, right? So this is also the same god mentioned on the Moabite stone. Then we have this tablet that directly speaks of Nergal, right? Remember, we've been breaking down this Nergal character from ancient Acadia, Assyria, and Babylonia. But for the last 3 or 4 slides, I've been expressing to you the biblical narrative of who the Moabites, just outside of Israel to the east, who the Moabites worshipped. So it says in this this archaeological piece that was found, of Nergal, the lord of Haulum, Atal Shen, the carrying shepherd, the king of Urkesh and Nawar, the son of Sadar Mat, the king, is the builder of the temple of Nergal, the one who overcomes opposition. Let Shamash and Ishtar destroy the seeds of whoever removes this tablet. So it's interesting that now we have, and then it says the craftsman, Shom is the craftsman of this tablet. Now this tablet is called a foundation tablet, and its dedication to god Nergal by the Hurrian king Atalshi, the king of Urkesh and of Nawar, circa 2000 BC. Circa 2000 BC, guys. They date this back to 2000 BC. That's like Tower of Babel, straight up Tower of Babel time period. That's a long time ago. And it's also in the Louvre Museum. Okay. So now it's directly on stone. It's connecting Nergal in the same godship area, in the same respect, with Ishtar and Shamash. Well, Ishtar is Isis of ancient Egypt. Shamash, if he is the same as Molech, that's also going to be another name. As if it's Baal, that's also the same as Osiris. That's also, these are the same type of gods that are presented differently. By the way, one of the representations of Shamash is that he was the sun god. We see this mentioned in, I think it's Judges 14, but Molech is represented both in modern days. He's represented as an owl, but in the past he was the bull with big horns. So very interesting. It's the reason I'm saying this, because these are the same little groups of gods that we're getting descriptors of, and they also are directly connected to Nergal. Who is this Nergal? Who is this character? Fragments of a vessel dedicated to the temple of Nergal in Nineveh. So this is interesting. Showing Shalmaneser III kneeling before Nergal, currently held in the British Museum in London. Okay, so this is a little place right here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but this is supposed to be Shalmaneser III from Scripture kneeling in reverence of Nergal in his temple. And they got their little baskets. It's very interesting. Shalmaneser III entering into a peace treaty with the Babylonian king Marduk Zakir Sumi. So this is another famous hieroglyph that's found of Shalmaneser. So I'm just giving you more validation to even Shalmaneser III, one of the kings of Assyria, before Babylon took over Assyria, before Nebuchadnezzar took over Assyria and made it part of the Babylonian Empire. They were also worshiping the same gods and had peace with the Babylonians, because they're literally they're doing the same destructive practices. They're worshiping the same gods. 2 Kings 17, 3 and 4, Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, attacked him, and Hoshea became his vessel and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hosea had conspired to send envoys to the king So of Egypt, and that he had not paid tribute to the king of Assyria as in previous years. Therefore, the king of Assyria arrested Hosea and put him in prison. This is validation to the hieroglyphs, or to the archaeological finds that we just found of Shalmaneser III, who worshipped Nergal of Assyria in the days of Hosea. Okay, so this just gives you more validation to this concept of this guy was known about in the Bible as one of the foreign gods that was worshipped. So you guys remember we talked about the apotropaic magic, and specifically about the amulets. So now we're going to Keep that in mind as we go on to talk about. Remember, one of the other nicknames of Nergal was Era, sometimes called Ira. It's an Akkadian plague god known from an epos of the 8th century BCE. Era is the god of mayhem and pestilence, who is responsible for periods of political confusion. He was assimilated to Nergal at some point. This is why they're one and the same. So we've got Nergal being described as a god of mayhem and pestilence. What do we get from his first description from the Assyrian description? Is that he was a god of war, of disease, which is pestilence or plague, and then also of the underworld. But this goes on to say he was a god responsible for mayhem and pestilence, responsible for periods of political confusion. That's fascinating. That's fascinating, guys. Era, an Akkadian plague god known from an epos of the 8th century. Here is the amulet that's been found directly linked to Era, and it's supposed to be a protection against plague. One of the amulets, one of the apotropaic magic pieces with an actual spell on it, with the actual writings on it to help give him protection against plague. Interesting. Here's an Egyptian amulet used to protect against different various forms of evil, because they practice the same type of magic. So they would also put their spell on the piece, if you will, on the amulet. And as you can see the size of these, there's a guy's finger there, usually worn on a bracelet or a necklace or something like that. So there's a unique text that's been discovered. Actually, 36 copies of it have been discovered in what's called first millennial sites. And it's the 5 of the first millennial sites that are mentioned are Assur, Babylon, Nineveh, Sultantip, and Ur. You guys remember Genesis 12 as Abraham was called out of Ur of Chaldea. So this is all. Ur is located near Babylon, and it's in the region below Nineveh and also below Assur. Okay. The Era text soon assumed magical functions. Parts of the text were inscribed on amulets employed for exorcisms and as a prophylactic against the plague. These 5 tablets containing the Era epos were first published in 1956 with improved text based on additional finds appearing in 1969. Perhaps 70% of the poem has been recovered. So this direct amulet from ancient Acadia, attributed to the god Era, which is Nergal, that supposedly was you would put his words from this text that was to help you as employed both for exorcisms as well as a prophylactic against the plague. Right? An amulet for protection against the plague. Nergal is Era. We're going to jump over across the Mediterranean a little bit, go over to Greece. It's an Olympian deity in ancient Greek religion and mythology. Hermes is considered the herald of the gods. He is also considered the protector of human heralds, travelers, thieves, merchants, and orators. He is able to move quickly and freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine. We're going to explain that a little bit. It's very vague in this first description, but we're actually going to break down that further. Aided by his winged sandals. But guys, by the way, this little hat doesn't show it, but he's also depicted as having like a little flat hat with wings on the side and little sandals with wings on the side. This is where you get your Captain America character. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit more as we talk about how he and Apollo had specifically related to gymnasiums. It's very fascinating. He's able to move quickly and freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine, aided by his winged sandals. Hermes plays the role of the psychopomp, or the soul guide, of the conductor of souls into the afterlife. Oh, wait a minute. So now he's a god of the underworld. In myth, Hermes functioned as the emissary and messenger of the gods and was often presented as the son of Zeus and Maya, the Pleiad. He is regarded as the divine trickster. Oh, does that mean he does signs, and wonders? For which Homer offers the most popular account in his hymn to Hermes. His attributes and symbols include the Herma, the rooster. Well, that's interesting. Didn't the Hebrews call Nergal the rooster? The tortoise, the satchel or the pouch, the talaria, which are winged sandals, and the winged helmet, or simple petasos, as well as the palm tree, the goat, the number 4, which it's interesting, number 4, several kinds of fish, and incense. However, his main symbol is the caduceus, a winged staff intertwined with 2 snakes copulating and carvings of the other gods. His attributes had previously influenced the earlier Etruscan god terms, a name borrowed from the Greek Herma. In Roman mythology, Hermes was known as Mercury, a name derived from the Latin merchant or merx, meaning merchandise, and the origin of the words merchant and commerce. Interesting. Beginning with the earliest records of his worship, Hermes has been understood as an underworld deity, and some sources will call it that chthonic deity. It just means underworld deity, subterranean deity, heavily associated with the earth and or the underworld. This is what I was talking about earlier, where he can traverse between the mortal and the divine realm. They didn't believe the divine realm to be above the firmament. They believed it to be down below. As an underworld deity, the worship of Hermes also included an aspect relating to fertility, with the phallus being included among his major symbols. The inclusion of a phallic imagery associated with Hermes and placed in the form of Herma at the entrances to households may reflect a belief in ancient times that Hermes was a symbol of the household's fertility, specifically the potency of the male head of the household in producing children. So how interesting that Yahweh, the one true God and the creator of heaven and earth, tells you to, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 9, he tells you to put his words, his instructions, his commandments on your doorposts, not penises. You see how backwards the occult is. Hermes is identified by some with the archetype of healer, as the ancient Greeks ascribed healing magic to him. It's interesting, right? So we got a guy in charge of the caduceus, representing commerce and merchants, money exchange business. Now we got a guy, he's one of his other attributes is to be a healer. Oh, and he's also the god of the underworld. That's interesting. Revelation 13, 11 through 12. And then I saw another beast rising out of the earth, and this beast had 2 horns like a lamb, but spoke like a dragon. And this beast exercised all the authority of the first beast, and caused the earth and those who worship in it to dwell, those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose mortal wound had been healed. Interesting. And here we have Hermes, with all these other associations with Nergal and Era, also being called someone that could heal with magic. It's interesting. And Nergal, famous for being able to use different types of magic for protection against plague, disease, and sickness. Interesting, huh? A further Roman imperial era syncretism came in the form of Hermanubis with the Egyptian god of the dead, Anubis. This is my Waymint moment. Did he just say Hermanubis? Like Anubis of ancient Egypt? God of the dead? Anubis? Like the Anubis that was secondhand man to Osiris? Supposedly resurrected Osiris after the first time he died with magic? That Anubis? This Anubis who was in the top 3 pantheon with Ra and Osiris? The Romans realized Hermes and Anubis were one and the same, to the point where they literally called him Hermanubis. It doesn't get more easier than this, guys. Hermanubis. Hermes is Anubis. Yes, they have different representations. And we're going to talk about the look of Anubis. Just like Nergal was described as being like a guy with 2 horns, right? Throughout the centuries, they take on these different attributes to appeal to the people in their culture. So, yeah, here we have Hermanubis. The Romans were like, oh, Hermes and Anubis are the same. Let's call him Hermanubis. Like, this is crazy. Hermes and Anubis were both psychopomps. That means they guide your soul to the underworld after you die. Now, I don't believe this, guys. Now, this is their belief. This is the occult belief. We know what the scriptures say. Angels are the ones that take care of your soul in Sheol afterwards, and you're not subject to these demonic gods. That's a lie from Satan, right? That's a lie from the occult. What we believe in the scriptures and what they proclaim about what happens to you after you die. So just remember, I'm reading the occultic beliefs about what they taught and practiced pertaining to these gods. They believe that Hermes and Anubis were both psychopomps, the primary attribute leading to their conflation as the same god. Hermanubis, depicted with the human body and a jackal head, holding the caduceus. In addition to his function of guiding souls to the afterlife, Hermanubis represented the Egyptian priesthood, the investigation of truth. Beginning around the turn of the 1st century AD, a process began by which, in certain traditions, Hermes became euhemerized. Now, that's a word meaning euhemerized means like the stories of him originated because they believed it was true. So the idea of euhemerizing one of these ancient gods was that they knew the origins of the god was true, but they knew some of the details have been embellished over time, like I was trying to say earlier. So this was like openly talked about in the 1st century AD, according to historians, that Hermes and Anubis they believed them to be real entities in the past, but they understood that some of the details of their events had been embellished a little bit. So the humorized, that is, interpreted as a historical mortal figure who became divine or elevated to godlike status in legend. Numerous books of wisdom and magic, including astrology and theosophy and alchemy, wait, what? Were attributed to this historical Hermes, usually identified as the Alexandrian form of Hermes Trismegistus. Trismegistus. It's hard to say. My wife was laughing at me the other day. Trismegistus. Trismegistus. I think we said it. I think we got it. So, guys, the theosophy, right? What did it say? The books of wisdom and magic, including astrology, 1st Enoch chapter 7 and 8. This is what the fallen watchers taught mankind. Theosophy, right? This is what we talked about in part 10 of Investigating Babylon about the lady that I can't even think of her name right now. The Theosophist lady in the early 20th century that was connected with the formation of the United Nations, and the eugenicist connected with Bill Gates, his father, that were part of the Theosophist society. The people that declared openly that they wanted to bring the practices of the occult into the open again. That was a part of their long-term goal. Traced back to Hermes. And these works were generically called Hermetica. And so let's look at this Anubis character, guys. Yeah, Blavatsky. Thank you, Wendy. I couldn't think of her name. Blavatsky was her name. So in Anubis, also called Impu. So guys, Anubis is actually the Greek transliteration of the god's name. It's not even an Egyptian word. Anubis is the Greek word. The Egyptian word was Inpu or Anpu. So that's fascinating, right? So Anubis is the Greek name of the god of death, mummification, embalming, the afterlife, cemeteries, tombs, the underworld. In Egyptian religion, usually depicted as a canine with a man or a man with a canine head, archaeologists have identified Anubis' sacred animal as an Egyptian canid, the African golden wolf. Now, I know a lot of people think that it's a jackal head, and that's how it is depicted in a lot of art forms, but technically they claim it's an Egyptian, or it's an African golden wolf is what it's supposed to be, which is interesting considering all the wolf imagery in the ancient Greek epics, and then, just ancient depictions of the big wolves that were these chimera big wolves. So it's interesting. But Anubis, god of the dead, Egyptian, this is the famous Anubis, guys. This god was also known as here's some of the names that they attributed to Anubis in ancient Egypt. He was the first of the Westerners. That's so crazy. It's fascinating to me. Lord of the sacred land, he who is upon his sacred mountain, ruler of the 9 bows. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The dog who swallows millions, master of the dog who swallows millions. The dog who swallows millions. And then also master of secrets. Another name that they gave him was he who is the place of embalming. And also he's called foremost of the divine booth, or the divine house. It's crazy, guys. Crazy, crazy. The positions that he had were also reflected in the titles he held, such as he who is upon his mountain, or Lord of the sacred lands, or foremost of the Westerners, and he who is in the place of embalming in the Old Kingdom, dating back to 2600 BC to 2100 BC. That's over 2000 years BC is what they claim. The standard way of writing his name in hieroglyphs was composed of the sound of the sound signs INPW followed by a jackal over an HTTP sign. I don't have the hieroglyphs to show you right now. I'm sorry. But this is Anubis, guys. This is the famous Anubis. This is Hermes to the Greeks. This is Nergal to the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. This is Nergal to the Hebrews. And this is the the comrade and the friend and the second command to Osiris underneath Ra, the famous Anubis. Now let's look at one of the descriptions that they called him as being head of the nine bows, or atop the nine bows, sometimes called Anubis of the nine bows. In the New Kingdom tomb archaeological finds, these seals that they found depicts Anubis sitting atop the nine bows. That symbolizes his domination over the enemies of Egypt. This is referring to military power. What was Nergal described as? A god of war, god of the underworld, god of plague. Anubis, here's an actual, and this is crazy, guys. So this little black obelisk onyx stone thing here, that not obelisk, but this little black onyx stone that they carved this into and then overlaid with gold, with the Sphinx sitting on top. That's actually supposed to be Anubis on the nine bows. So the nine bows are underneath the Sphinx, and their little descriptions of how they would draw a bow back then. And this is Anubis sitting atop. And what it was supposed to represent was the nine common or most common enemies of Egypt's history that Egypt had military power over, and Anubis sat in the top over those. This was the representation of that. Guys, the Sphinx is Anubis. The Sphinx, the lion-like man, that is representation of Nergal in the Old Testament. It is Anubis to the Egyptians. It's been in our face this whole time, guys. This is the god of the embalming, of mummification, and the purpose of that was to preserve the body for resurrection, to be healed through magical arts and raised back to life. So in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I don't talk about that much because I don't want people to go read it, basically, it describes Anubis as being so good at resurrecting people they had to tell him to stop. It's crazy, right? This is the famous Anubis that resurrected Osiris, supposedly, in the Osiris stories. So what's strange, guys, is that in modern day culture, Anubis, as you see on screen here, Anubis has actually had a resurgence in popularity. Like, it's crazy. This is just some modern artwork. By the way, look at the tower in the back. There's a tower in the back. There's some pyramids on the other side. This is, by the way, the dirt, these dust devils in the desert, Islam calls them jinns, calls them unclean spirits. So I think that this little depiction of Anubis on this, whoever painted this modern artwork, literally he's got the pyramids, he's got jinns, he's unclean spirits, he's got a Tower of Babel representation behind him. It's fascinating. But yeah, this guy, and look, he's got, and this hair, like, this is anyway, it looks like a wolf, but also looks like a lion's mane, which is pretty wild. But there's been a resurgence of popularity of this Anubis character. And let's look at some of that, guys. This is some modern artwork, and there's also video games coming out about him. This is just people that are glorifying basically Anubis, which is fascinating. I don't know why you do that. It's the god of the dead, the god of inflicted death, the god of disease and war and plague. And people are just glorifying him. Oh, and by the way, someone decided to stylistically draw him in modern clothes walking next to Osiris. I wonder how they come up with that idea. Here is someone getting tattoos of ancient Egyptian Anubis and Ra. Ra, basically, if you guys don't remember me talking about this from the Gods of Egypt, Part 5, or the Gods, the Part 5 episode, I'm going blank on the title of it right now, but Ra is the Egypt's equivalent to the Hebrew Satan. Ra is the patron god. Ra is equivalent to Zeus to the Greeks. And here's this guy that just has this wonderful new idea that I'm going to get this sophisticated, fancy artwork of both Ra and Anubis on my forearms. Here's a back tattoo with Ra and Anubis, with the Ankh of resurrection in between them and the Eye of Horus down below. I don't know what the other Egyptian hieroglyphs mean left and right of them, but man, that seems pretty wild. Oh, do you want some really fancy metallic Anubis playing cards with all the occult imagery you can stand everywhere, all over them? They sell them now. They're fancy. How about Nickelodeon talking to the kids? House of Anubis, teach them some magic. This is like a Harry Potter wannabe that teens and young kids are learning magic on this series, Nickelodeon, but it's called House of Anubis. Why? Why was Harry Potter not good enough? Nope, they need actually the House of Anubis. How about some wine, guys? Do you guys want some wine with literally it's called Anubis wine, made I'm guessing by the Caduceus company. So just in case you needed a direct correlation that the world knew that Caduceus was Anubis, or excuse me, Anubis carried a Caduceus. Because remember, I mentioned that I haven't shown you the statues and the hieroglyphs yet. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But remember, I was showing you that the descriptions of the Romans that they said, oh, well, Hermes and Anubis are the same dude. Like they both carry the Caduceus. They're both responsible for the same things. Like, let's just call them Hermanubis. Here we have whomever, and this is out of New Mexico, so they know some history to the point where they've got the Caduceus and artistically drawn, leading up to this flower of life, the occultic symbol of the flower of life with 353, looking like a globe. Also, talking about the staff of the god Hermes, the herald of the gods, and also calling it Anubis. So this is, and then you guys want to see what the numbers 353 are? See, it says 353 on the wine bottle, connecting Hermes and Anubis. But if you go into the gematria and breakdown of the Greek 353, oh, it's for Hermes. It equals Hermes. So you guys remember back in 2009 to 2011, I believe it was, there was a huge Anubis being ferried around the United States for 3 years. And he's got the staff of Ra in his hand, by the way. But guys, look, they made these little jokes with the little suitcase with him. He was in New York. I mean, here he is next to the Golden Gate Bridge in Brooklyn. And then he's also next to the Statue of Liberty. This is him going through New York. Here he is in Minneapolis. Here he is awkwardly being placed at the Denver airport, one of the most occultic sites. Yeah, no. This particular one was O'Hare in Chicago, and then this one was Denver. Little statue, little 20 foot tall statue of Anubis being taking the time to carry this thing around all over the United States for 3 years. The first year that Obama was elected, from 2009 to 2011. So let me show you guys something real quick. Give me just 1 second so that I can open it up. Okay, so this is after, by the way, after it toured the United States, they took the statue of Anubis to London, and I guess it's permanently there. But just this article from it says the city of London. Well, I guess maybe it was earlier than 2009. I thought it was 2009. It says this was published in 2007 though, so maybe I'm wrong. But I could have swore it was 2009. But it says the city of London was met with an unusual sight a few weeks ago when a 25-foot statue of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead, made a trip down Thames on the back of a cargo ship. That's the river in London. The fiberglass statue's journey ended in Trafalgar Square, which rested there for 3 days before being transferred to different locations throughout the city. Anubis's appearance is precursor to the November 15th opening of the Tutankhamun and the Golden Age of the Pharaohs expedition, which would be housed in London's O2 bubble, formerly the Millennial Dome. Sponsored by the National Geographic Society, the expedition will showcase 130 artifacts found in the tomb of Egyptian king Tutankhamun, allowing visitors to marvel at treasures such as the golden diadem worn by the king or the gold coffins that once cradled its internal organs. Over 300,000 tickets have already been sold or reserved for the exposition, which just completed a 3-year tour around the U.S. Anubis, believed by the ancient Egyptians to have escorted the dead to the underworld. Okay, that's what it was. I forgot. So it was originally here, and then in 2009, 2011, they toured it around the United States and then took it back to London. So they also toured around the Arch of Triumph, which is associated with Baal's Arch. And a lot of people already know about that in this community because of Chad Schaefer's work. But they've already toured around. So together, Osiris is Baal, They toured around his arch to the United States, and then they also toured around Anubis. Yep. Just for fun, I guess. Just for fun. They thought it would be funny, or they thought it'd be a great way to market this exhibition in a museum across the ocean, right? So this is him going through the River Thames and the London Bridge opening for him. It's just ridiculous. But guys, this is the same Anubis that was all over, like he's the top head of the pantheon of the Egyptians. Here he is with Isis, just the both of them in a carving. And he's holding, the bag's been broken, but he's holding the staff of Ra. Both of their bags have been broken. His face has been knocked off, which is funny. Her nose has been knocked off, but she's got the two horns above her, which represented Baal, the Apis bull, as well as the sun, which represented Ra. She's of course got the serpent headgear on as well, but he's of course in that main hierarchy of the Egyptian gods. Anubis also was depicted in hieroglyphs to hold the crook and the flail, which were symbols used in ancient Egyptian society. The attributes of the deity, they were originally attributed to Osiris because they were representative as fertility and power. But they became an insignia of pharaonic authority that other pharaohs would then hold or be put in tombs with afterwards. The shepherd's crook stood for the kingship, and then the flail stood for the fertility of the land. Well, guys, just in case, that's not just saying, oh, we got good soil, that's great. No, it means the wealth of the land, the commerce, the business, the trade. Kingship, commerce. Authority, commerce. He's holding the authority of Osiris in his hand and over commerce. Anubis. And he's also got a form of a Vajra with the Djed, as well as the symbol for resurrection, the Ankh, connected to it. So, but we've talked about that already. Oh, guys, check this out. Why does the Vatican have a picture of Anubis in Roman attire with a caduceus? So this is the actual statue. Just in case you're thinking I'm just making stuff up and reaching for connections. Here's in the Vatican, the Roman Vatican. Remember, it was the Romans in the 1st century AD who said, well, we should just combine the descriptions of Anubis and Hermes are the same. They're the same god. So let's just tell the people, let's just give them one word, Hermanubis. This is Hermanubis you're looking at, an actual statue in the Vatican Museum. Of course, the Vatican has Hermanubis, right? Of course. They're the priesthood of Babylon. And here's the caduceus in his hand, which represented merchants, authority over economies. This is Hermes on the left with his giblets blurred out. He's got the caduceus. So does Anubis. Same gods. Different representation for different cultures. Same gods. This is Nergal. This is Hermes. This is the caduceus. Same gods. Nergal is Era. He is Hermes. He is Anubis. The god of the dead, the god of war, the god of pestilence and disease, the god of healing magic, the trickster. What about Hades? You guys heard that name before too, right? So in ancient Greek religion and myth, Hades is the god of the dead and the king of the underworld. Oh my goodness. So just it's very common, just like we read about with Nergal in ancient Acadia and Assyria. He was also called Era. So Hermes is also called Hades. Hermes is actually the young depiction of the false god, whereas Hades is the old man depiction of him. It's wild, right? But the names are synonymous: god of the dead and of wealth and of commerce and merchants. Look what he's got. Look what he's got at his right. He's got that Cerberus, that three-headed dog. Here's Nergal. Here's the Cerberus. Here's Hades. Here's the Cerberus. No other gods carried the Cerberus. Just Nergal and Hades. Nergal is Era. He is Hermes. He is Anubis. And he is Hades. It's the same god. Now, the Babylonians, a little bit down, supposedly according to archaeology, a little bit down the road from the days of Nergal, they actually had a tale, what's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. That was one of the more popular writings found in archaeology. And it's widely believed that two of the main characters in the Epic of Gilgamesh represent Nergal as Gilgamesh's best friend, Enkidu. And Enkidu is described as a wild beast of a man whom Gilgamesh, that would be Nimrod, trains and takes to battle with him as his helper. This is another strange depiction of Enkidu and Gilgamesh. It looks extremely non-heterosexual, but this is just from ancient hieroglyphs, from ancient Babylon. So, guys, you remember me talking about the seals? We talked about this in part 15. So the seals, this is where I try to give you the breakdown about Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Those all are happening at the start of the 42 months of the reign of Apollyon, which is the beast that comes out of the pit. It happens at the start of the 42 months. So when the first beast comes out of the pit, the second beast is right behind him. That's exactly what Revelation 6, 7 through 8 talks to us about. Its writer's name was Death. Let me just go ahead and read the verse 7. When the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." Then I looked and I saw a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed close behind. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, by famine, by plague, and by the beasts of the earth. Guys, just as Revelation 9 tells you the literal name of the first beast, Revelation 6 tells you the literal name of the second beast. Apollyon and Hades, two ancient Greek gods, Apollo and Hades. It's there. It's just in the text. It's in the text. It's been there the whole time. It just took us to research who were these names in history. What's their story in history? Oh, and then we figure out, that now we can see them everywhere in the Old Testament. They're the Babylonian gods, the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, the Akkadian gods. It's all the same. And apparently they're coming back. Revelation 13, 16 through 17 talks about the second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. Sounds like someone in control over all merchants and trade, right? Like the description of Nergal and Hermes and Hades. So in our modern day, we have something that's being pushed on our society. It's already thriving in China. It's already oppressing people in China. It's called social scoring. It's a part of what's called a social credit score. And it's basically depending upon your behavior, the state is allowed to give you a rating, basically like a credit rating, except it's not based just upon your financial decisions. It's based upon all your lifestyles. And of course, it has to be monitored and enforced by the government as well as the merchants that you interact with on a daily basis, where you buy your food, where you pay your bills, all that stuff. So this has already been going on in China, guys. This is being pioneered, I should say, in China. And they're trying to bring it to the U.S. as well. They're trying to bring it across the world, because how else can they tie your behavior to your commerce? So, as explained in a very, very basic breakdown, this is probably the most simplified basic I could find. I thought it was a nice little graph, but this is what China's social credit system looks like. Each citizen is given 1,000 points, and they're monitored to judge their behavior and rated according to their behavior. So this requires monitoring at all times. And say on the left-hand side, you can gain points in their social credit score system by donating blood or money to organizations or engaging in charity work. Okay, sounds great, right? Sounds good. Or praising the government on social media. Wait a minute, what? That just took a turn. Literally in the graph and also conceptually, that just took a turn, right? You're like, oh, well, yeah, donating money to people that might need it. That's great. I personally won't donate blood, but that's interesting. The elite definitely wants you to donate blood for their rituals, but then engaging in charity work. I mean, how could that be bad, Sean? That seems nice. Well, I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you had more status in society because of your good works? Yet, meanwhile, my Savior tells me that when I give, don't let my left hand know what my right hand's doing. Much less get rated in some sort of weird social system where I'm actually getting points and a betterment in society and favoritism in society based off of me getting acknowledged for that good work. This is the opposite of Scripture. The Father wants you to do it because it's in your heart, not because you're going to advance the society. Deuteronomy 15, which is the basis of giving to those who are in need in the Torah, Yahweh says, don't do it to get recognized like the Pharisees. When you give, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. Meaning, don't make it a big deal. Don't make a thought of it. Don't praise yourself for it, and don't receive praise from other people for it. Just do it, man. So, it's this, yeah, this is the opposite of that, okay? And also helping the poor is down there. But also, like, why would I want to praise the government on social media? That's backwards. Like, that's what gets you points in their twisted social credit score system. Now, on the right-hand side, you can lose points by not visiting your aging parents regularly. So now they got your parents telling on you, apparently. I don't know who tells on you unless they realize, oh, your parents, that means that it doesn't even specify whether your parents are in some sort of elderly care home or not. I mean, most people in China, their parents live with them. They don't even have the type of culture that we have in America with elderly care, senior citizens centers everywhere, and elderly homes everywhere. Like, most of the people, their parents would live with them when they get to a certain point. But that means that if the parents aren't living with them, then who's telling on these people if they're not visiting their parents regularly? And what is regularly? Who's deciding what's regular? It's the most oppressive, authoritarian 1984 idea that's bathed in potential good works. But it's not at all. Oh, if you get caught cheating on an online game, well, that means they're monitoring your online activity to find out if you're cheating. If you're insincere in apologizing for the crimes you've committed, meaning they don't have to believe you if you try to make amends with somebody, and they can still dock your credit score because they have unforgiveness. You see who's monitoring this? The government doesn't have the people to monitor it, so it has to come from the people themselves, which means the people themselves have to make an internal decision on what they report as good or bad behavior for these scores. So if someone tries to come and apologize to you for something, and you're not agreeing with it, and you don't like their apology because you're still angry at them, well, now you're rejecting Torah to continue to hold that grudge, and then suddenly their apology means nothing, so you'll continue to give them a bad score. This is anti-Torah, guys. This is, if you ever want to see the game of life, so-called, all pun intended, literally the twisted version of what the Torah puts out, of what the Torah encourages people to do, this is it. And this is just the whitewashed, if I could, this is just the sterilized examples that are currently implementing this new system in China. Also, if you spread rumors on the internet, you can get docked points. Who's monitoring that? Who's determining whether it's a rumor or not? What if it's true information, but you're just labeled as a rumor, as misinformation? What if I said that the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords is coming back, Yeshua's coming back? Another person's like, oh, that's just a rumor. No, you can't validate that. I don't believe that. Dock you on your credit score. This is nonsense. I mean, it's obviously authoritarian control, but it's a game designed for the people to adopt the mindset of the authoritarians over them. So the authoritarians have people doing their light work for them. The enforcement of their authoritarianism is being done for them. You guys remember what we talked about in episode 10 of this series, part 10, I should say, of this series, of the collectivistic authoritarianism? That was one of the main of the top 5 things of Babylon, the top 5 ways, practices of Babylon that is consistent all throughout history. Number 1, the collectivistic authoritarianism. Social credit score. This is the implementation of it. This is the Babylon is trying to get its hooks in society to do its ways. And they're trying to tie your daily interactions with other humans, which should already be covered by our Heavenly Father's Torah, right? His instructions for living. But instead, now they're going to decide instructions for living. And if you go outside those instructions, well, it's going to be very difficult to live in their society. Revelation 13, 16 through 17, the second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. So a lot of people don't realize that. So just as we talked about the social credit scoring, let me say it like this. They're wanting to put on all societies across the world, across the planet, the flat plane of the earth. They're trying to put on all societies this social credit score. China's kind of a test ground because those poor people over there, those poor souls, are just the mentality of them are so herd oriented. Like they're just a perfect cultural study to enforce that. Because they literally just do whatever they're told, man. It's wild. Now I know there are believers over there. There's people that are trying to create dissension and they're trying to kick back, but the masses, it's yeah, almost as bad as the United States. Yeah. Anyway, so they're connecting your daily behavior with everyone else to what you can buy, sell, and trade through social credit scoring. The beast says if you don't do the behavior he wants, which is to worship the first beast, you can't buy, sell, or trade. That's why I said right now that little graph looks like it's very sterile, right? Oh, you should go help the poor. You should go see your parents. That'd be great. You shouldn't cheat on online games, right? Don't spread rumors about people. That creates problems, right? Oh, I agree with all that. I agree with all that. It's about who enforces it. God's instructions through his Torah with the priests and the elders set up and the community and the deacons and pastors, none of that is to be a watchdog that just goes around and just starts rating people and limiting their ability to interact in life through someone else evaluating your behavior. None of that was designed for that. Like you, and especially if there was a charge brought against you for some sort of wrong behavior, you had to have specifically with specific charges, you had to need a second or third witness. But other times, like this is Matthew 18, guys. You would encourage to go to your brother and work it out and forgive each other and do your best. Go to them once or twice. If they reject it, then the third time, then you bring in the elders to try to address the situation. But that was only if the sin was serious. If someone lies to you, you can either call them out, you can not believe them, or you can walk away and just say, all right, well, I know how to not interact with that person anymore and may God lead them into better behavior. But you're not going to, every time you think someone's lying to you or spreading a rumor or something, or cheated on some game you're playing that has no consequence to anything in life, you would not go run and get an elder or priest and say, this guy cheated. Oh my gosh. There's not even a penalty listed for lying in the scriptures, but yet it's called a sin, a transgression of the covenant. You don't want to do it. The enforcement is the collectivistic authoritarianism of Babylon with the social credit score system, which will be the same atmosphere with the mark of the beast. If you're not worshiping, like we read the passages multiple times, the second beast tells people to make an image of the first beast and worship it. If you don't worship it, you're killed. Just like we see back in Daniel, right? The 90-foot golden statue. Daniel and his 4 friends did not worship it. So who told on them? The people, right? The guards, the people that are in charge. Same thing with Daniel being persecuted in the days of Darius. The other political advisors came and looked through Daniel's window to see him praying 3 times a day and then told King Darius. They're enforcing the ways of Babylon because the king can't see everything, right? This is how they have to get people to enforce their behavior, their standards, and also their idolatrous worship of the first beast. They have to have all the people on their side, on their team, the sheep, like zombies, we're going to talk about in just a minute, that actually go out and enforce the worship, the false idolatrous worship of the first beast. And that's done through a social credit score in the system. And we're going to talk about possible implementations of that with technology and the actual mark here in just a minute, so stick with me. But what I've got on screen right now here, guys, is ancient temples and how they were centers for trade and merchants. This is from a historian. As we talked about earlier, Nagal was associated with Adad in different parts of Mesopotamia. And this is talked about the temple of Adad and Ashur and Ishtar and Ashara served as warehouses for merchandise and votive offerings that they managed. But the treasuries of the god Ashur might have been kept in the city hall since it was under the responsibility of the steward. In Kanis, which is one of these places where they had a temple to Adad, Oaths were sworn at the gate of the god Astur, also called the sacred precinct, which might have represented a chapel and dedicated to the god as a part of the Karam office complex. The priests of Adad, Ashur, Ishtar, Suan, Samaz, and Saramatan, also cited for their role in the trade. Manuba, priest of Asura, was the recipient of silver earned from trade in Anatolia, that's in the area that the book of Revelation was written to. And the priest of Suan possessed one of the few houses where it was possible to buy both tin and textiles that would be exported to Anatolia. Guys, ancient temples were centers for commerce and trade, profit, and the priesthood, even the female servants. But I didn't have a chance to read the entire passage from this historian. Further up in this particular article that this paper that he's written, it talks about how some of the young maidens who were devoted to the god Adad or Ashur and that were never able to marry, they were then given certificates of business, of bonds, to go to other cities and do trade on behalf of the temple. So, like the temple itself, as it says, served as a warehouse for merchandise and the votive offerings that they managed. These are goods and service. These are these are textiles. These are tin, metal, and textiles, cotton, silk, spices, anything that is traded within the city. Their temples served as this is their Amazon warehouse, guys. Their temples were the warehouses for these goods. The place of worship is directly related to the place of merchants. What do we see Jesus say in John chapter 2, 12 through 16? After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. They stayed there a few days. When the Jewish Passover was near Jesus, and they went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, Yeshua found men selling cattle, sheep, doves, and money changers seated at their tables. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those selling doves, he said, "Get these out of here. How dare you turn my father's house into a marketplace?" Guys, he is ticked off that he's seeing his father's house being treated like a temple to a foreign idol. What did he say? What like I've talked about in my previous videos on here, New Testament Context for Pastors, in Matthew 1 through 3, right? Some of the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 9 about Yeshua going to the people in both Samaria and in Judah, in the land of Jerusalem, the area of Jerusalem. They were living in darkness. They had bad teachers. They were corrupted with Roman influence, false idol worship. They were not just worshiping Yahweh. He went to a land of darkness. He was the light of Zebulon that shined upon a land full of darkness, wickedness. He went to a people that were confused in their theology. They had horrible teachers in the Pharisees. And this is one of the moments of abuse where the Pharisees is allowing idolatrous merchant behavior to go on in the temple of Yahweh, like happens in the temple of the Babylonian gods and the Assyrian gods. Because they were not doing the Torah. This is where hopefully anyone watching that doesn't understand the New Testament and thinks the law is bad, you might want to know the difference between the law of God and the law of the Pharisees. Very different. John 14:2, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me as well. In my Father's house are many rooms, and if it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? We know that is the New Jerusalem. Now here is the New Jerusalem personified as a woman speaking in Isaiah 54 and Isaiah 55 as promises are being told to her, Zion, the New Jerusalem to come. Isaiah 55, it says, come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you without money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on that which is not bread, and your labor on that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of foods. This is at the descension of the millennial reign, the millennial reign, the ascension of the New Jerusalem. Just like in Revelation 22, come drink of the water, come keep the commandments and come into the house, get free food and water. This is the house of prayer that was intended. It's not a place, it's not supposed to be a place where you have to go in and you have to, it's a place of merchants for profit. This is supposed to be a place of prayer, and the house itself is offering free food and wine and milk. in abundance. Now, during the feast days, Deuteronomy 14 will kick in, and we explain that in another video. But the point is, that's once the millennial reign is active and people are traveling from afar and bringing their money with them. But the point is, this whole concept here is that the New Jerusalem will have its own abundance. You won't have to come and show your mark to buy, sell, and trade here. You just have to be keeping the commandments or be resurrected already. It's a beautiful thing, guys. An extension of ourselves, Baal's zombies. So this is one second. I'm sorry, guys. This is a phrase that I took from these videos. I'm going to show you real quick. These short little videos about the idea of what possibly the mark could look like as being a seal. The word mark means a seal, a sign, right? So you're being sealed, just like there's believers that are sealed by the angels of God in Revelation, and two different spots that are mentioned. There's also the seal that's going to be part of the enemy, which is the mark of the beast, right? That we've been talking about. So in Revelation 9, 5 through 6, this is kind of a dramatic picture, okay, guys? I'm just showing you a little bit of this idea of the locusts were not given power to kill them, but only to torment them for 5 months. And their torment was like the stinging of a scorpion. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will escape them. This is after they get stung. So for that 5 months, they want to die, but they can't somehow. Well, I have a feeling I know why they can't. Now, most people, when you say zombies, most people just think of, instead of thinking about this, they think about these horrific pictures of all this pre-programming, this indoctrination of all these zombies that just keep continually every year for it's been almost 20 years now. They just keep making movies of zombies. I thought it was going to be a fad that was going to go away in 2004. They just keep making more series, more things about zombies over and over and over. Why? Why do they keep pushing the zombies? Now, most people will think that those who take the mark will be this type of zombie, right? You get that fluoride stare zombie. People, and the reason this is a joke, right? This is a famous meme online, but the joke of this is that fluoride diminishes your willingness to care. So that when people are pressing upon you, you're just like, whatever. You just want to avoid confrontation as opposed to thinking, no, I'm not going to stand for that. I'm going to stop, we're going to stop this injustice. We're going to start doing what's right. Some people think that all the fluoride that's been put in the water, some of the effects of it that's been documented, is that it takes away your willingness to care about things. It takes away your passion to stand up for what's right, which is fascinating if that's true. So some people think that this is what the zombies will look like of the mark of the beast, that whatever the mark is, it just makes you indifferent to truth because you've already given your allegiance to this idolatry of the first and second beast. Or we could already be seeing the zombies as demonstrated with this picture, where some people, just like the open idolatry of ancient Babylon, which was to do this act you see on the sign here. I'm not going to say it because I want this video to somehow keep going get recommended to people, but I know it's a long shot. But what you're seeing on screen here, some people think that this is already the zombies being kicked in because they're supporting the practices of Babylon through this horrific ritual. That was what happened with Molech. That was the type of worship that went on with Shamash, with Nergal. Now, I've showed you 3 different levels, if you will, of zombies, right? One that's very cartoonistic, right? Because people think that it's like, oh man, people, what's animating them? What's really keeping them alive if their flesh is dead and they're truly dead and they're just a host body? And if they are a host body, are they going to be quick? Are they going to be fast? Are they going to last 2 days? Are they going to last a year? What's keeping them alive, right? Are their actual internal organs functioning? That's why I think this is a hyperbole example of what's truly probably more like this and this. It's a brainwashing, right? They want to show you the zombie movies because they think that it's like that's so outlandish and so silly, right? That someone's like a half a face and half an arm, and they're slinking over to you, and they're like, "Ah, rah, rah," and they're trying to chop you and eat your brains. Like, that's all seems kind of silly that because your natural body thinks, okay, what's animating them? What's keeping them going, right? That's every episode. When I used to, like back in the day when I first started watching the first few seasons of Walking Dead, I just kept saying, what is keeping these things alive? Like, this makes no sense. Like, I was too logical. My brain couldn't handle the obvious problem with the whole plot of that story. So yeah. And then, of course, they keep trying to shoot him with guns, and I'm just like, guys, just get a sword. You don't have to worry about bullets or gun jamming. You cut off their hands, they can't scratch you. You cut off their necks, they can't bite you. You're done. Just kick them over and walk away. Like, you can work your way through. You can be like Samson and the Philistines. You can work your way through 1,000 zombies in an afternoon. Like, I just never understood it. It always made me laugh. I never understood that that show is just ludicrous. But this idea of the brainwashing of the culture of the practices of Babylon, to the point where, like you see in the sign here, people are literally screaming for human sacrifice. They want it. So when this massive beast comes up, that Revelation 17 says the whole world wanders after it. And they also talk about, oh, who is like the beast? Who can make war with this beast? The same people that are fawning after that, if that beast says, hey guys, we're gonna not only do we think that this is a human right, but it's necessary for this religious practice because it gives you all these fake, these lies. Just didn't fill in the lies after that. They'll come up with some stupid reason, right? Just like they did in the past. Just like the elites believe it gives them power to go through these rituals and do these horrific practices. That's what part of the Theosophic society is talking about, right? They want to externalize the things that are done in secret. They want to bring out to the front, to the public. Well, the beast and the first beast are going to bring it out to the public, and they're going to cause people to openly go back to the open rituals of worshiping Baal and Molech and Ishtar and Nergal and Osiris and all these guys, Apollo and Zeus. And what you see on the screen here is associated with that. It's integral to that idolatry. So Matthew 24, 9-14, says Jesus, he says that then they will deliver you over to be persecuted and killed, and you'll be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will fall away and will betray and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and mislead many. Because of the multiplication of the wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who perseveres to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Is that the gospel of Jesus dying on a cross? Jesus is talking here. This is Yeshua. Is he talking about, did he say the story of me being crucified on a cross will be preached to all kingdoms, and then the end will come? Sure, it's included in the story of the kingdom of God. I mean, that's the backstory of how Yeshua came to earth, but manifest in the flesh, obedient until death, perfect without sin, then was resurrected to his glorified state and given the priesthood as the king and high priest over the kingdom. So if you want to focus your message on who the king of the kingdom and the high priest of the kingdom is, you can talk about Yeshua's life, death, and resurrection all you want. But that's not what Yeshua talked about. He only mentioned that not even a handful of times, 2 or 3 times. 44 times in his ministry, documented through the Synoptic Gospels, he talks about the gospel of the kingdom. This is one of those 44 times we're reading here. The coming of the city of Zion. Which he enacts the ability for it to come. He makes it a possibility. We praise him for that. He's amazing. We give him all reverence and respect. He's our Lord, right? He's our Savior. But that's his message, talked about this kingdom that's coming. And Yeshua claims that while the love of many are growing cold because of lawlessness, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world, testimony to all nations. I'm going to talk about that at the very end, guys. And I got to wrap this up because I've got a Lighthouse meeting coming up pretty soon. Revelation 14, 9-11. A third angel followed them, calling out in a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in its image and receives its mark on its forehead or on its hand, he too will drink the wine of God's anger, poured undiluted into the cup of his wrath. And he will be tormented in fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment rises forever and ever. Day and night there's no rest for those who worship the beast in its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name. Let's focus on that. There's 2 parts of this, guys. This part is if you receive the mark, you get the wrath of the Lamb. Well, that wrath is told to us as the bowl judgments. These are bowls of wrath that are poured out on the last day of the 42 months of the reign of Apollyon. The reign of the beast is only 42 months, and on the last day, which is the day Yeshua returns, the bowls are poured out And as you read through all those bowls, guys, I mean, they're, the malignant sores that break out on those who take the mark of the beast in Revelation 16, 1 and 2. Massive hailstones fall on people. The darkness that goes over the kingdom of the beast, people are gnashing their teeth. And like the sun burns people, right? This is happening to those who've taken the mark of the beast. This is the wrath that happens to them. Fire and hail is falling. This is happening to them. All the survivors that show up in the day of the Lord, as far as I can tell, that didn't happen to them. So we see a small instance of this in Joshua chapter 10, when Joshua's facing the 5 Amorite kings and they go to battle. And it says hail starts falling from the sky and it just hits the Amorite soldiers. Seems to me like you got some angels up there with little sniper rifles shooting out hail. And it's killing the Amorite. And it says more hail killed the Amorite soldiers that day than the sword of Israel. Hail thrown from heaven. So I think it's fascinating that everyone who takes the mark, this is the point where you're included in this wrath. You're included in this wrath if you take the mark, guys. And it's the bowl judgments. Okay, so that means that let me try to break this down real quick. Revelation 9, we talk about the scorpions that come out and they sting people for 5 months. I personally believe that sting and that scorpion, that it's the sting of a scorpion is the pain that they're feeling, and it happens for 5 months. That's them getting the mark and the implementation of it into their body, because and we're going to talk about these little videos I'm going to show you real quick. It's a process of technology that's being developed that can actually, through nanobots and through other technology, can actually do mind control. It can take over your body. So that's how you're obedient to the beast. You're guaranteed to be lumped in with him in his wrath because you worshiped him and you took his mark, and you can't kill yourself because he won't let you. You've been taken over. You've willingly let yourself be taken over. Why? Because those scorpion-like things go and they attack people who do not have the seal of God on their head. Well, the people that have the seal of God on their head, the believers, they're going to get persecuted by the beast through warfare, through martyrdom in different ways. But as far as making someone a subservient conscript to the beast and the second beast, taking the mark, which automatically lumps them into this group that's going to get the actual bowls of wrath, those people, that's the ones that are targeted. So this is why you got to definitely make your decision early on who you're going to serve. Let's look at a couple things real quick, guys, about the potential concepts of what the mark of the beast could be. And let me put this on screen, or let me play this quick little video for you guys. I think it's going to be fascinating.
From MRIs to EKGs, sonograms to scanners, medical technology allows doctors to monitor vital information about the inner workings of the human body. Imagine if some of these machines could be made so thin, light, and portable that they could be attached right to the surface of your skin and go wherever you go.
There's some very sophisticated device functionality sitting on my skin now.
2 NSF-funded innovators have done just that by engineering something called an electronic tattoo, a microelectronic health monitor that has the potential to revolutionize the field of healthcare technology.
The electronic has always been rigid. To make electronics flexible, that's quite a challenge.
The path taken by John Rogers and Hyun-Gong Huang to develop the electronic tattoo is an example of how collaboration is often a key or critical part of the innovation process. It all started in 2005 when both men worked at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Huang happened to stop by a lecture Rogers was giving on campus.
Then we started talking, and we find John's work very fascinating, and John find my work on mechanics useful. So naturally, the two of us evolve and work together.
At the time of their first encounter, Rogers, a material scientist and electrical engineer, was looking for new ways to use electronic circuits formed on the surface of silicon. Silicon is a natural semiconductor that has electrical properties between that of a conductor, a material in which an electrical charge can flow freely, and an insulator, a material that doesn't conduct an electrical charge at all. Semiconductors are the heart of most electronics today.
So at a very simple level, you can use a semiconductor like silicon as a switching element to turn electricity off or on.
Huang, a mechanical engineer who has since moved to Northwestern University, specializes in the mechanics of curvilinear materials, which have surfaces that are wavy.
Curvilinear surface means it's a surface that's not flat. That's not, for example, my hat. The surface is curvilinear.
By combining their fields of expertise to hatch the initial idea of the tattoo, they set out to manufacture a prototype, something that has taken about 7 years and multiple breakthroughs to produce.
But one of the key things is to make electronics as flexible as possible that can follow the skin morphology.
The first breakthrough happened when they figured out how to slice off the surface layer of a silicon wafer. This new technique resulted in silicon that could bend, just like this single sheet of paper. Next, they discovered how to make silicon elastic, allowing it to be either flat or wavy in shape.
Suddenly you have a form of silicon that can bend, it can stretch, it can deform, it can coat and conform to curvilinear shapes, very much like biological tissues.
Even though it is called a tattoo, there is no need to pierce or puncture the skin. Instead, the device sticks on.
So what we can do then is we can take this device, laminate it on the skin, almost like a children's temporary transfer tattoo.
To figure out how to engineer this, Rogers and Huang looked to nature, noting how easily lizards stick to walls.
Like gecko and others, they can easily attach to a wall and easily let go. So for us, we want to borrow some of that idea and to make the electronic not using glue to have strong adhesion with the skin.
Once attached, it can wirelessly detect electrical signals from inside the body, such as those given off by cells within the heart that cause it to contract and pump blood through its 4 chambers.
This particular device is powered inductively. So there's a coil here. I can bring a wireless power supply in proximity to this device and deliver power to it through the air.
Rogers and Huang filed at least 10 different patent applications with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to protect their invention before commercializing it. Patents allow inventors to acquire what are known as intellectual property rights to their inventions for limited periods of time.
The intellectual property is absolutely crucial. If that's not done carefully and thoughtfully, and if you don't really have distinctively new ideas that are well separated from things that people have tried in the past, it won't be viable. You won't be able to commercialize it.
A startup company called MC10 has licensed them multiple patents and patent applications and is developing a new generation of flexible healthcare devices.
While doing mechanics work, I never thought that I would have so much interaction with electrical engineers or material scientists. But now it's really at the interface we create new devices that never existed before.
Innovation brought to life by a unique and long-lasting collaboration that has the potential to stretch the limits of modern healthcare technology.
So there it is. That's just one little option. That's one little way that they're advancing into being able to have something that's super small, super flexible, that has high potential technological capability to affect your body in a variety of ways. We've got more examples though, guys. It's not. It's just saying that, oh, they put this flexible microchip on me. I don't think that's actually. I don't even think that's actually the mark either. I mean, because what we're talking about is the mark is associated to your behavior. That's why we've been talking about social credit system. That's why we've been talking about them bringing back open idolatrous worship to the first beast, which is this Apollyon character. This is why I say it's about worshiping that, and that's why when I was breaking down the social credit scoring system, that it is anti-Torah, right? It's the opposite of the commandments that they'll be enforcing. Just, you know, it's like a ramped up version of Judaism, guys. It's like a ramped up version of what we see in the first century with Yeshua, having these people that are coming around that are saying, well, you're not doing our rules, right? Yeshua's addressing the Pharisees, and the Pharisees were like, we we represent God and the commandments. And then they're like, all these traditions they bring in while they ignore the commandments. And then they're the ones that come by to try to enforce those traditions on you. This is a more sophisticated version pointing allegiance to the beast. So this is an idea of your behavior is intimately tied to the idea of being able to buy, sell, and trade. This is the ultimate lockdown, the ultimate enforcement of oppression. So real quick though, let's look at two other quick little videos about the potential mark of the beast of because we're not talking about, when I keep saying the mark of the beast, guys, I'm in these videos I'm showing you, I'm talking about the potential applications of what it could actually be that goes in your hand or your forehead. We already understand its theological implications and its societal implications connected to worshiping the beast. Okay. So now I'm talking about the actual practical thing of why does it mention something in your forehead or your hand? I know a lot of people like to say, oh, it's because the commandments are supposed to be as if it were, something on your hand as a reminder or your forehead as a reminder. But this thing, literally, if you don't put this and take this mark on those areas, then you can't buy, sell, or trade. So we know it's a physical thing, right? And it is directly connected to your behavior, but it is a physical thing. And so let's look at a couple of other options here about some crazy concepts about futuristic tattoos. Look at that. Microsoft. How appropriate.
I think there is no fashion statement greater than being able to change how your skin looks. So these tattoos enables anyone to create interfaces directly on their skin. The materials we use enable it to be very aesthetic and to reflect this metallic look. There's this emerging popularity in these metallic jewelry temporary tattoos. And they have really enabled the skin to be put in the spotlight again as a surface for decoration. We draw a lot from the usability and also the aesthetics of metallic temporary tattoos into the design of our on-skin interfaces. So this process is enabled by gold leaf. Gold leaf has been traditionally used for the frames of paintings, or they have been put in vodka or even on chocolates.
When she's talking about gold leaf and how it's implemented into this type of tattoo that has technology in it, I'm just laughing thinking about Austin Powers Part 3, where he's that like Swedish version of the bad guy who's like, I like gold. Yeah, it's hilarious, guys. So think about how many times we've seen the ancient world covered in tattoos and how much it was gold or silver. That they were covered in these what looked like bracelets or amulets around their arms. Were they bracelets or amulets around their arms? Or were they tattoos?
So we are able to create 3 classes of devices. The first class is input devices to turn your skin into a trackpad or a controller to adjust your music player. The second class is output displays. For example, a rose on your skin that would change color based on your body temperature, or a fire that would light up to show your emotion. The third class is communication devices, such as NFC tags, so you can read data directly off your skin.
Okay, guys, you see that? It looks like it's fun. The first 2 examples they gave was like, ooh, it can be temperature sensitive, so they can change temperatures when you get change temperatures, or if you have emotions that cause different things, right? You could, I mean, that looks very much like anime, right? If you're to be able to have it, show different types of colors on your skin, or maybe control your iPhone or so. Oh, but now it's actually able to store information through a scanner. So this tattoo through specifically gold leaf is allowing you to control access to information. I wonder if you could put your medical history on there or your social credit score.
We can even enhance the aesthetics of existing metallic temporary tattoos by embedding LEDs. Where I come from in Taiwan, there's this huge culture of cosmetics and street fashion. And they're highly accessible and very cheap, so you can very easily change and edit your appearance whenever you want. It's just such an integrated part of our lives. This is something that we purposely wanted to make accessible to anyone. You could just use any graphic design software on your computer like Painter or something to just design the circuit. And then you would basically hook this up to this very cheap vinyl cutter and just cut out the traces on the film layer on top of a tattoo paper. And after that, you can just layer on the gold leaf and then remove it. After this, you apply the tattoo onto your skin as you would these temporary tattoos. In the future, when you walk into a tattoo parlor, you would come out with a tattoo like this. They will not only be very sophisticated technically, but they become an extension of yourself.
Did you guys hear that? An extension of yourself. This next video I'm going to play after this one, he says the same thing. This is orchestrated, guys. This is a propaganda piece. They want to make it fashionable. They want to make it appealing to the young kids. They want to make it, tattoos are very popular. They're becoming more popular. And I expect to hear that phrase more and more and more. It's an extension of yourself. And so, yeah, this is all going to be directly related to worshiping the false beast. And as you see, it can control your device, right? It's crazy. So let's look real quick though at another. Let's look at another quick video. This is from many of you guys are familiar with TED Talks. So this is one of the TED Talk given by someone that is talking about the futuristic tattoos that react to the world around you. And we're going to actually skip forward a little bit in this. Did he say many animals and insects can see UV light, but mankind can't? Oh, you mean like a chimera referred to as a beast? Described with an insect tail? Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Transhumanism, guys, it's a real thing. Okay, guys, here it comes. Listen now. Though he gave the socially conscious example, right, of how we can protect against skin cancer, which all that was based off misinformation anyway. But he gave the socially conscious bait for people to say, "Oh, this is really interesting technology that could help us." Now, listen, here's where it comes in, guys. So it sounds pointless, right? Because as Ann McKenzie in the chat is saying, she's like, right, because I take my temperature all the time. No one does. Not until the last year and a half. Not until suddenly when plague, whether engineered or natural, I don't believe it's natural, but plague has caused the world to go crazy on, oh, do you have a slight temperature? We should let me put this little laser gun up to your head so I can test your forehead or your wrist for your temperature. Now, I'm not saying that the Onero is the mark of the beast. I'm just saying that it's all a precursor. It's all setting up the future. It's all conditioning the masses now in this regard of plague and pestilence to get ready for the enforcement of and this technology idea of how they would check people, how they would have this mindset of the people thinking I need to get something on my forehead or my wrist, which, by the way, your right hand in scripture can also refer to the entirety from your elbow to your fingertips. So it's not always just the piece of the hand, but it can be your entire forearm as your right hand. So this is the idea that this is all just setting up the future, guys. This is a part of just like they've pre-programmed us for decades and decades, sometimes centuries, like with the globe concept. They've pre-programmed the masses to believe a certain thing. This is part of the pre-programming, is the increasing of making it more susceptible and more easily accepted to get some sort of augmentation in your skin, and have it connected to your behavior, and have it connected to your social consciousness, as well as your life and what you can achieve in society or have capability to do, um, as well as part of your worship in society. So it's all integrated into one. And this is some ideas for at least what they're revealing to the public as far as the technology they could use to do this. It's almost over, guys.
We could, for example, have tattoos that gave us information about what's going on inside of our bodies, such as our blood sugar levels if we're diabetic, or our blood alcohol content if we're wondering if it's safe to drive. Or what if we could have tattoos that we could just change color or turn on and off at will? We could create tattooable displays that solve the problem of buyer's remorse. Yeah, you don't like your tattoo anymore? Just change it or turn it off. Or how about tattoos that make our skin stronger, less likely to be cut or infected or to wrinkle as we age?
Do you guys hear that? I mean, in case you don't already understand that he's speaking transhumanistic language right now, and he has been since he started talking about the medical usage of these type of tattoos. Now he's just going for it full bore. Now he's just telling you could live longer. You could have no wrinkles. You could be stronger. You could get hurt less. We could monitor all your vital activities. We could keep you safe. Whole body be tattooed, guys. People would be gladly signing up for this. And yes, Windfeather, he said it again. It would be an extension of yourself. It's propaganda, guys. Pure.
I believe that all of these things are possible. In the future, tattoos will not only be beautiful, they'll be functional too. So, the only question left to answer is, what superpower do you want from your tattoo? Thank you.
All right, guys. There is your your new topic of propaganda that's being pushed onto the masses through this idea of tattooing. And how interesting that God's word tells you not to get a tattoo. That's interesting, right? I wonder, we've already talked about in this series, in this Investigating Babylon series, how the ancients had tech, both with engineering, with architecture, with flight, with the manipulation of chemicals, with alchemy and theosophy, the idea that they could raise the dead, even chimera, advanced genetic biological information. Is it possible that they had advanced tattooing? And listed amongst all the other practices of Babylon in Leviticus 18 through 20, where Yahweh tells his covenant kids of Israel, do not do their ways. He also includes, do not get a tattoo or markings for the dead. Very interesting. So, guys, I don't profess to know the exact implementation of the mark of the beast as far as specifically, will it be one of those nanobot style tattoos that you can't even see unless it's under a certain light, or unless a certain type of animal, a beast maybe, can see it? I don't know, right? I don't know. All I do know is that the behavior, the identification of the second beast is clearly given to us through scripture and through history. Literally, his name is given to you, Hades. Just like the first beast is literally, his name is given to you. We just have to figure out who these people are. And then we're also getting all the descriptions of how they're going to tie together worship of the first beast directly to your behavior, and how that will limit you from buying or selling. And then, of course, there'll be some sort of implementation of this. But the concept is, guys, people are constantly asking us, and I apologize, I'm going to have to cut this short. My Lighthouse meeting starts in 1 minute. I won't have time for questions this particular series, but that's why I had to do it earlier in the day and then late at night. You will not miss when the first and second beast show up. All the things that are happening now, it's not the mark of the beast. Okay? You cannot accidentally take the mark of the beast. You will not miss when you see the beast. This is why I say again, why the world is not ready for what the scriptures tell us will happen, and the world accept it. Currently, the world is not ready. to, to see the return of Anubis or Nergal. the return of a guy with 2 horns and coming out of his head, telling you that you got to worship his buddy. The world is not ready for that right now. I know there's a lot of apostasy in this world. I know there is, but there's still a large amount of people that, I mean, all of Islam would not follow after that. And a large majority of Christians would not fall for that. They would clearly know this is false idolatrous worship. I think there's still a lot of decades left before we get to the point where the world is ready for what Revelation tells us. So I don't know if that brings encouragement to you or not. I just want you to remember, guys, that the second beast is this guy named Hades. He is this guy that's also referred to as Nergal. He is the right-hand man, if you will, to the first beast, which we've identified as Nimrod and Apollyon. Okay? And the Father has an answer for these two dudes, right? The holy bros versus the unholy bros. The first and second witness show up at the same time the first and second beast show up. The Father's got an answer. Okay? Be encouraged. You will not miss it when this happens. I promise you. You're not going to accidentally take the mark of the beast. All right, guys. Appreciate you guys joining me. I hope this was a blessing to you. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Share the video if it blessed you. And we'll see you again next time.